Welcome back, or welcome to Grateful and Full of Greatness. I'm your host, Mark Glissini. And on this podcast, I sit down with guests who, in my opinion, live their lives with the pursuit of greatness in mind. This platform allows me to discuss and to explain strategies that go into reaching peak performance. This is episode number 18, and my guest is Dr. Nick Molinaro. Dr. Nick is not only a licensed psychologist with over 35 years of experience, he is one of my mentors and dear friends. He specializes in clinical counseling psychology, sports psychology, executive assessment, and performance enhancement. His passion and empathy, combined with his knowledge, faith, and selflessness, remains inspiring and separate him as one of the best in the field of psychology. It's a privilege for me to work underneath and alongside of Dr. Nick, and I'm excited for listeners to hear about his story, perspective, and expertise. Without further ado, Dr. Nick, thanks for joining me on here.
Mark, it's more than a pleasure. It's an honor to know you and to have had our experiences working collaboratively, and I appreciate being able to be in a mentor-mentee relationship with you, and look forward to our collaborations in the future.
Thank you very much. So where I would like to start is the purpose of life is to discover your gift. The work of life is to develop it. And the meaning of life is to give your gift away. You have been a guiding light for me and many others for decades inside the realm of sports psychology. Could you shed light on your earlier chapters before you entered the field and what influenced your path towards it?
That's a great question. Thank you, Mark. Well, it starts out many years ago because, as you know, I'm an old man. But my father said something to me many years ago, and I didn't know what it meant. And he said, you can do anything anyone else does, maybe not as well or as great as they do, but you can do it. And I said, Dad, what does that mean? And he would just look at me. And he said, you would figure that out at some point. Well, I don't think I really figured it out until maybe the past 10 years. And when I recognized that, as I look at my experiences growing up and coming from a family that neither my parents had graduated high school. And my sister had a mental condition, schizophrenia. And my brother was a substance abuser. So being able to get to this point in my career, having finished all the education, had the opportunity to work with many great individuals in performance, in sport and business, I finally got it. That as long as I continued to pursue with grit things that I wanted to do, I could get them accomplished, maybe not as well as others, but I could get them accomplished at least to my abilities. That's how it all started.
Awesome. And when was the first moment where you said psychology or sports psychology was for you? Was there a turning point, an inflection point, or was it something that happened gradually?
Well, the psychology piece occurred when I was a high school student, and I took my first course in psychology. And after having taken the course, I became aware that I wanted to become a psychologist. I didn't even know what that meant. I could tell you that. I didn't know exactly what that was. But as I pursued that in college, I recognized that I had an affinity to listen to people and to work with them. And I always wanted to work with kids. That's how it all began back then. The sports psychology was a result of an accident driving race cars. I was driving cars that were doing around 115 to 140 top end, and one of the cars was 160. Came down the downhill at Lime Rock at about 100 miles an hour, 85 miles an hour. I lifted, spun the car, I took out another car and backed into a guardrail and got a concussion and broke my arm. After that happened, I knew that I wanted to continue to race, but I couldn't do it if I was anxious. So I cured myself because I was a clinical psychologist at the time and desensitized myself to the fear of coming down a downhill with my foot on the gas pedal all the way to the floor, and recognized I can actually become faster. After that occurred, I said, wow, this is a really cool thing to do. And I didn't even know sports psychology existed. So after that, I started doing the research, and that's when I wound up at SDUIS, which I know you're going to be taking some coursework and probably in one of my classes. But after that, that's when I developed a passion for high-level performance, taking it outside the clinical realm and actually starting with athletes and then eventually going into business. But that's how that began.
I love it. And your answer started with listening to others and then it wrapped up into your personal experience. I would say the combination of the two allows you to do it, what you do at such a high level. Something that you're an expert in is assessment and quickly recognizing the needs of the person, like me, or the group of people you're working with. How'd you come to develop that skill set? And how important is that initial understanding in regards to the work you do with them?
Well, because I started my work with SDUIS and I was under the tutelage of Dr. Christina Vasari, she explained to me that I should take the course on the test of attentional interpersonal style that was being taught by Dr. Robert Nidefer, which is not, there are not many people who studied under Bob. That's how it began. And so once I took the assessment and started working with athletes, I recognized that because it could effectively discriminate factors that are essential in attention and being able to shift your attention and factors that influence interpersonal relationships, that's what the test is based on, as you know. I found out that I had to do that with everyone I was seeing. And it quickly brought me to understand individuals' qualities of attentional shifting or lack thereof, and factors that would influence the ability to do that, such as anxiety or distractibility, or interpersonal relationships like wanting to be liked by everyone, how that would take your attention away from being able to shift your attention effectively. That's where it all began.
I want you to go a little bit deeper into attentional shifting so that listeners can understand what it is. And kind of the question I have along that thread would be, do you think it's easier for some people to enhance their attentional shifting than others, or is it kind of a methodical approach that everyone has to follow?
And the answer is yes to both. Individuals that have certain predispositions that have lower thresholds to anxiety, for example, until they manage their anxiety, they're going to have a hard time being able to shift their attention. Because the anxiety becomes so overwhelming. If you look at the neurotransmission of individuals that become anxious, and then being able to try to get them to shift their attention outside of what their own experience is to what's going on the field or in battle. As you know, the test is also used with the Navy SEALs, that we need to mitigate the anxiety. I'm a classic candidate. I was anxious as a young man. I'm too old to be anxious now. But when I learned how to manage my anxiety, then I was able to shift my attention much more quickly, which allows me to drive race cars at a high speed and not crash them again. So I would say that you need to do a very thorough understanding of who the individual is, that are their predispositions that's going to allow them to shift their attention, teach them how to modify anxiety responses, or teach them how to modify being distracted by things that are not relevant. But then you can teach some people to do that. Absolutely. So there's an affinity. You have to have the potential. As you know, you can't do anything you don't have the potential to do. No one's ever going to run a mile in a second. So in spite of the fact that you might be trained, if you don't have the potential, you're never going to get it to the highest level of other people. But to your own highest level, yes.
Awesome. And you talked about earlier desensitizing the anxiety. You did that for yourself. And as you went deeper and deeper and you could understand yourself, that you could make that change for yourself, where did you find yourself going to next? So you desensitized your anxiety, and then you wanted to go deeper and deeper in enhancing your performance. Where did you go after that?
Right. Well, my basic method of getting people to their highest level of performance is to do what I would describe as mind mechanics. Change factors that are cognitive that will influence emotional responses. So that's the first step. And the next step, which again is kind of a deepening of awareness about how to manage factors that will distract you. Stresses are great examples of that. And then what I would describe as the highest level of performance is spiritual. And here I enter into, deep philosophical discussions of meaning and purpose of life, phenomenology and heuristic understanding of oneself. What are the basic systems that a person's using, like thinking fast and thinking slow? But as I help people become more aware of meaning and purpose. And that spirituality, as you know, takes a religious spirituality or a philosophical spirituality, but we have to look at the meaning and purpose that drive people to optimal performance. Those are the steps that
And I love it. I love going, and you shared this with me before. It's something that I'm constantly in tune to. And when I look in the mirror, look at my mind mechanics, my stress management, and then the spiritual aspect is one that, especially now, we're having this conversation during a pandemic, and there's a lot of events that go on that you could be very, very focused on what's happening next. However, less so about the why it's happening. So, what would you suggest or recommend to listeners going through this pandemic? How do they focus on the spiritual aspect, the meaning and the purpose, when all it seems to be happening is them avoiding the stress? Can they focus on the spiritual aspect while managing the stress?
I think you can do that. I mean, I think if you're spiritual, you're going to be affected throughout your life by the influence of that, whatever it might be. But what one thing I would say to people is that they should take a look at Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. And as you know, Frankl was a Jewish psychiatrist in Nazi Germany in Auschwitz. And in his work on Man's Search for Meaning, he talks about purpose and that kind of thing. So I think that you can do that. I mean, clearly that was a great example of being under the influence of coercion, right? And we're being coerced. We're as close to martial law as I think our country's ever seen, that we're living our life differently than we've ever done before. And as a result of this kind of coercion of living our life in a different way, it's a great opportunity to be reflective of purpose and meaning. Now, I don't think it's as easy to identify other aspects of our spirituality during that period of time unless we do what's called indwelling, understanding the impact that this coercion crisis is having on us in a way that is deep. In the search through phenomenology and heuristic research, the understanding of our experience, and really being able to open ourselves up to it, and not in just a cavalier way. I think this is a great time to do that, but I think you have to be equipped in how to do that. I think you have to know how to experience your experience. I don't think it's enough to say, oh, that color is blue. And by the way, Mark, does that blue look the same to you as it does to me? We're not going to know that unless we start understanding the differences that we have in the experiences of our living. And so in our own discussions, you know that we can do that. And that's really helped us. So I do think that people can do this now. I think there's going to be a biasing, but it's a great time to start the search.
I absolutely love the phrase experience.
Answered your question, but
No, it was excellent. And understanding the impact, and really what comes to mind for me is awareness. And it's something that I always look to maintain and enhance, is what's actually going on, what's important, prioritizing in that way. The profession that you devoted your life to has the power to change the world by enhancing the performance of the students, the athletes, the executives, the professionals, one life or more at a time. When you think about this type of life-changing impact that you have, what is your greatest achievement or proudest moment as a psychologist?
wow, it's a great question. Something that's happened recently is a professional athlete that I've been working with, and who was able to achieve a very high level of performance, and then for some reason it disappeared. I did not know him when he was at that highest level. Was brought into his life by someone who was a former student of mine. And what happened yesterday, actually, is that we had this conversation about meaning and purpose. And we got to talk about spiritual qualities. And it's, what do you mean by that? As we started the discussion of God. And what's happened yesterday was a week ago, after we'd had the first discussion, he came back to me and said, I changed my mind. I no longer believe in evolution. I believe in creation. So how'd you get there? He quoted, this conversation. It started out, so I took my wristwatch off and I said, do you know what one of these things are? And I showed him on the video screen. He said, oh, it's a watch. I said, well, take a look. Have you ever looked inside a watch? He said, well, never taken one apart, but I said, but if you look inside a watch and you saw all those things that were taking place, would you believe that that just kind of grew? Or would you say someone had to prepare that? I said, no, I think someone had to prepare that. I said, well, why would you think life is any less than that? I said, there's no evidence in research that one species turns into another species. It never happens. So, a snake doesn't turn into a gorilla. And there's no evidence that gorillas turn into humans. And so we had this conversation a week ago, and he came back to me and he said, it was so impactful. I touched that person's life to help them understand that the meaning and purpose has now changed for him. It's no longer to be a professional athlete at the pinnacle of his career. It's now to understand his meaning and purpose because there must have been some higher form that brought him into the world. So that was one of the greatest things I think that I've had a conversation. And in a week's time, he came back and told me that he changed his mind about where he came from.
I absolutely love that. We have a character coach that works for us and the San Diego Seals, the National Lacrosse League team that I play for out in San Diego. And him and I have deep conversations. And we were having coffee one day, and he was talking to me about remaining aspirational, about being pulled by your North Star in life, by having this purpose, having this why. And once you have that, once you understand that spiritual aspect and you can grasp it, then every event in your life will take place and have meaning. And this was such a profound conversation that I had him on my podcast, and something that he said changed over time. Although he does want to ultimately one day be an NFL coach, his ultimate goal is being the spiritual leader for his family. And that's an endeavor that will take him decades and decades of his life to figure out if he's actually doing so. So I love this kind of conversation of how we're talking about something so deep, yet if you just have this simple reminder every single day, it can carry you with passion. When we first met, Dr. Nick, I remember you saying that the next few years are going to be the best yet for you. Right? After decades of consistent great work, where do you think that optimistic fire comes from? What advice would you give to a listener who may feel at this very moment that their best moments or work are behind them?
I begin each day, in prayer. I begin each day reading something spiritual. And what I find so exciting is that I've decided, not so long ago, that first of all, I've always believed that every moment of every day is the opportunity to excel at whatever you're doing. And what comes to me in my constant reflection of why I'm here is that there's something exciting that's going to happen every day that I'm not prepared for. I never know what it's going to be. And I'm on the search every day for that. So I'm on that search. And so my advice for people is to have, that kind of disposition of looking for what you weren't prepared for today. Now, that could be someone I'm treating clinically. It could be something that happens in one of the programs I'm teaching in now as doctoral students. It could be something that happens in my home. I don't know. And I'm looking for it. And every day, I'm never disappointed because it occurs. Now, sometimes what is unexpected is not pleasant, and sometimes it's very pleasant. But what that is about is to help me understand that there's things that are outside of my control every day that's going to influence me. And it's an interesting way to go through life. I just never know what it's going to be, but I know it's going to be there.
Oh my
And
God.
it just encourages me. So I'm 73, and I think I'm still kind of youthful in my mind, and people tell me I act like a child, but it's that appreciation that there's things that are outside of my control that every day I have to be prepared for and be able to react to. I think that that's what keeps me going.
Extremely powerful. I love how you begin your day. I do the same. And you rather be prepared for an opportunity that does not yet exist than have an opportunity and not be prepared for it. So I absolutely love the fact that in the last two responses you've had, it has circled back to preparation. I think we started with awareness, and now when you were talking about the watch, the preparation came up again. Something that I've added to my mental arsenal or knowledge tree, if you will, that you taught me is the difference between confidence and self-efficacy.
Oh,
So much so that I've changed the quote in my mind: preparation breeds confidence to preparation breeds self-efficacy. Could you elaborate on that idea?
sure. I mean, this whole thing around confidence is a problem. I was interviewed in the past. As you know, I've done some work on TV with Michael Breed and the Golf Channel, and been on Fox 5 News and Fox 5 Sports, and another network was talking to me about possibly uh, talking about what goes on in the NFL. I said, "Oh, sure, I can help you with that too." I said, "But as long as we don't talk about confidence, because I can't stand when we hear the announcer say, 'Oh, he lost his confidence, he dropped the ball.'" I said, "Really? I mean, this is a professional athlete, a world-class athlete, an Olympic athlete. You're telling me that their confidence changed dramatically because they've made an error?" And so I didn't get the job. But, so the reason I bring that up is context that, I'm appalled at this. I think it's very hurtful to our youth, because I think our youth are being educated by people that don't really know what they're talking about when they talk about confidence being changed, and confidence is the best predictor of performance. Now, if you look at the definition of confidence, you go look it up in the dictionary, you'll find three definitions. Your belief in your abilities to perform, your feelings and your abilities to perform, and or your belief in your feelings of your abilities to perform. So I'm saying, well, that's interesting. Do your beliefs always tell you the truth? Absolutely not. People go to war, die, and kill other people based upon what they believe. Do your feelings always tell you the truth? No, I'm sure at some point in the darkness you may have become frightened. You turn on the light, you're fine. You turn the light off, you're not. And so neither our beliefs nor our feelings tell us the truth about ourselves. So why would we use confidence as a good example to predict performance when the foundation for confidence is based upon beliefs and feelings which are not telling us the truth? To go further with this, if the basic theory is that if you have high confidence, you have high performance, if you have low confidence, you have low performance, then how does someone with low confidence and low performance ever become high? Just say, well, you change your confidence level. But if you have low confidence, how can you ever perform at a high level? It makes no sense to me.
Right.
So then clearly we search for what efficacy is. And
Mm.
Bandura talked about efficacy years ago. And in Bandura's work, what he found was that it is the truth about your ability, not what your beliefs or feelings are. There's a very significant difference between what is your beliefs and what are your feelings and what the truth is. The glass is neither half full nor half empty. It's 4 ounces in an 8 ounce glass, 8 ounces in a 16-ounce glass. It's the truth. Why are we talking about people's beliefs or feelings about things? Let's look at the truth. That's what efficacy is about.
And this drives right into the point that, uh, especially during this time, you can get extremely caught up in your emotions and your feelings, which don't always give you the truth. But I've been challenged. I've challenged myself to go deeper into my thought life. What do I really think about this feeling that I'm having? And are there any actions I can take to change how I'm thinking about it? And what comes to mind is the word dogma, and what comes to mind is the preconceived truth that we so deeply believe and never ever want to find information to the contrary. I think what we're talking about, the difference between confidence and self-efficacy, is so important.
Yeah, we are talking about the truth, and when you look at grit, passion and perseverance, but what Duckworth was also talking about is having a low need for positive reinforcement, and having kind of a high need for being able to find the truth and to use that truth to move you. So we have to move away from this whole feeling thing. And I have no problem with people wanting to win. I have a problem focusing on winning. Winning is the outcome of execution. Execution is influenced by utilizing your excellence. We need those things in order to perform at a high level. If individuals paid attention to execution, so you've heard me talk about intention, you can read a paragraph and not remember a word that you read. But if I said to you, Mark, the very next paragraph, find the two most important things, you'd read that paragraph differently.
Absolutely.
And so when we use our intention to excel, when we use our intention to be aware of where our attention needs to be at execution, performance goes up. It's not based upon how you feel. It's not based upon your belief. It's based upon the truth. Put your attention where it needs to be. Execute, your performance will go up dramatically, immediately. Absolutely.
And although there are many things that are outside of our control, I'm always challenging myself and the clients that I work with, the people that I work with, my peers, my family, to live intentionally. Things happen by intention, not by accident. Something that you talked about earlier was your work with inside the sport of golf and with pro golfers, and how perhaps that is the most mentally tough sport there is. What is it about golf that interests you most, and why have you spent so much of your time working with golfers?
Well, after I had the auto accident, my wife wasn't too keen on me racing cars any longer. So I was on a search to find something that would be of interest and intrigue. So I started actually taking lessons to fly planes. And so I was flying a 172, Cessna 172, and landed that and was getting ready to take my license into solo and went up in a glider and, no power, which was equally as interesting. And I found out that I could do that. But my wife wasn't too keen on me driving race cars or flying airplanes or flying gliders. So this was when I was in my 50s. So I said, well, what I have? So I'm not an athlete, clearly I'm not an athlete. So I said, well, let's go take a look at this thing called golf. So I went and I took a couple lessons. I thought it was pretty interesting. Now, the interesting thing about golf is that there's so many things you have to do right, to get it done correctly. The interesting thing about golf that intrigued me the most is that a golf swing is 1.3 to 1.5 seconds, which means that if you're shooting par, you're swinging a golf club 70 times in 4.5 hours, which means that it's only about 90 seconds. So I'm going to try to master something that I can do in 90 seconds, but do it over 4.5 hours. That was very intriguing to me.
Wow.
That's what really kind of sold me on, being able to execute something in such a short period of time, but to do it in a protracted way. There's nothing else in your life that is like that. There's not one other thing that you do that you'll devote 20 to 25 seconds, maybe 40 seconds in your pre-shot routine to execute that in 1.3 to 1.5 seconds, but to do that when you're supposed to do that within 4.5 hours. I mean, outside of being a sharpshooter and being a SEAL maybe, but there's nothing like that in our normal everyday life. And I found that absolutely intriguing. How could you actually do that? So I said, well, let me learn how to play the game. So at the age of 52, I picked it up. So I'm playing for about 20 years now. But I still learned that I've never been able to master my focus of attention to execute that swing for 4.5 hours. My lowest score has been 79. But that's what intrigued me about the game. So that's how I got into it. And then I was fortunate, when I first started doing my performance work, to be introduced to a tour player. It was actually on the web.com tour. At that time, it was a nationwide tour. And that's how the whole thing started about golf. And then I was fortunate enough to have a couple of high-performing golfers and to meet Michael Breed. And the reason I work with Michael is because I helped him. And after I helped him, it took him a year before he recognized that I was going to be his performance psychologist, because he had seen other people. And then after a year that I had helped him, I was on the Golf Channel. And that's why that happened. But as you know, I've worked with your former alma mater, Yale, and their lacrosse team. And then working with an MLB player now that I just made the bigs at the age of 73, my first MLB player. So that's how I got interested in golf. But it was really kind of a cognitive thing for me to say, of all the sports, something that takes 90 seconds, but you have to do this over 4.5 hours was amazing. That's what intrigued me.
And one more question about the golf is the time between tasks. Can you go a little bit deeper into the time between tasks and how you would work with an athlete that, because that is synonymous and there is transition over to reality of life as a non-athlete is the time between tasks.
Yeah. Well, I think what that requires, I mean, so when you take a look at open sports like lacrosse, and for those of you who don't know what an open sport is, it means that someone's going to stop you from doing what you're trying to do. Okay. So in golf, nobody's going to stop you from doing that. And there's other things that are different about that. Somebody else starts it. So the play begins, when someone says start. I mean, in golf, you say start, but somebody else is always starting it when you're playing open sports. So what happens is that executive functioning in young people, it's one of the reasons why I like this, is to help young people develop their cognitive process. So in golf, since that's not the case, it means that they have to be able to make the decision when to go and to make sure that you're ready to go when you're supposed to, because there's going to be a clock running, but you don't know exactly when that's going to start. But in football and basketball, something else always begins. So it requires a discipline. It requires the ability to make assessments and to make a decision that's going to affect you, if you're in a team, to be able to do that. So it's a very, very different process. Now, when you look at life, and life and golf have been compared all the time. So you walk the same path, right? Play the same fairways, but you never experience it the same way twice.
Mm.
So individuals who are aware that, and although you drive down the same road every day, you'll see things you've never seen before if you become aware. So my interest in golf is to become aware of things you were never aware of. That's what goes on in life.
I absolutely love that. One of my favorite quotes ever since I was a little boy, growing up to be a man, was "No man steps in the same river twice, for it's not the same river, and he's not the same man." And that goes along the same thread. I think it's driven me to understand that don't live in the past unless I plan on going there. And the reason why I had you bring up the time between tasks is just that simple phrase that you used, the when to go. Right, the 90 seconds inside of 4 hours. Although there's nothing really like it, it is just like life. As you know, Dr. Gilbert, one of his favorite things that he's told me, and he'll say it almost every course and class that he goes through, is actions change your attitude, movements change your moods, and motions change your emotions. And really, in those three lines, what he's saying is you got to start. You got to go, right? Because if you can get yourself up and going, he does it with the class. He does it with one-on-one. I've seen it where he says, "What's your energy level right now?" Right, and then he has that student do maybe clap their hands or jumping jacks, and what they'll understand is they'll see 100% to 200%, 300% increase in their energy level just by movement, right? So the reason why I wanted you to bring that up is because it can be really helpful for those that are going through a pandemic, stuck at home, to still find those outlets and go, right? Because there will be, on the other side of that, some positivity.
Well, it's always going to come down to choice, right, Mark? I mean, so the human has 80,000 thoughts a day. And I like thinking, I liken thinking to breathing. So if you don't think about your breathing, you're just going to breathe. But you can hold your breath. I could say, Mark, hold your breath. I could say, speed it up. You could breathe from your diaphragm. You could breathe from your thoracic area. You could breathe through your nose. You can breathe through your mouth. Interesting phenomenon about breathing, which is very much like thinking. You can hold a thought. You can speed the thought up. You can let it go. Just like you breathe in, you can let out your breath. So it's a very intriguing thing. It's all based on choice. Now, your breathing will eventually take over. Otherwise, you won't be around. But you've been equipped for that to take over when you don't have to worry about that. But your thinking is like that as well. So when you look at, our work to help people perform at a higher level, whether it's a clinical way or, it's in terms of performance in business or sport, it's to teach people to use their decision making. That's all of what this is about. So when we talk about purpose, that's a decision. And when we talk about execution, that's a decision. So all of my work is about execution, about decision making.
You brought up closed sport, open sport. We've talked about a few different sports, a few different scenarios in your life, whether it was you driving cars or flying planes, all the way to golf. Over the course of your career, are there any phrases or solutions to problems you find yourself repeating or using most often on a consistent basis? I figure since individuals are unique, problems tend to stem from the same tree. Are there phrases or solutions to problems that you see yourself repeating most often?
Absolutely. When I was very anxious, when I was younger, and it influenced my ability to perform, I was a musician. So when I finally was going through my own therapy about how to deal with anxiety, it came up with it's only anxiety. That's all it is. I mean, it's a feeling, and feelings are overrated is one of the things that I say. Just because you think it's believe it or feel it doesn't make it true. That's something I will say all the time. Clearly, the best is yet to come. I've been saying that for a long period of time, and people say, "But Nick, you're 73," and it's like, well, the best is yet to come. So, there are things that are like that, and people describe these as heuristics, things that you've been using as shortcuts to get you through this. And clearly things like it's only anxiety that's a very powerful statement. It's only a feeling, but it's not necessarily going to last forever. So those things are simple, and some of them are, from my clinical investigation, and obviously others in terms of performance driven. But yeah, there are a lot of things that are like that help me get people to recognize them and to become automatic, just like in your performance as an athlete. You have to tell yourself what to do; you just do it.
Love it. And that question dealt with the consistency of phrases and heuristics. But when you look back on all the different places you've been, uh, different ages and variety of clients, unique experiences, what comes to mind as one or two things that you know now that you wish you knew when you were first getting started in sports psychology?
I wish I knew back then that I didn't have all the answers. I, you know, I thought that I had all the answers, and what I come to learn. So this is the segue into probably one of the greatest findings I've just stumbled upon about I think 2 or 3 months ago. Is wisdom is the application of knowledge in a different way based upon experience. So I'm still quoting things that I learned as an undergraduate. And I keep going back to a study that was done by doctors Stella Chess and Alexander Thomas on temperament and development, where they followed children from 4 weeks after birth for the next 50 years. And although that study was completed in the 70s, I'm still quoting it because they found something like at the age of 11 months, you could tell which individuals would be anxious.
Mm.
So, but now I apply it in a very different way, and that's what I think is wisdom. So I think one of the greatest things that has occurred to me is that I've become smarter as I become older, but not because I have any new information, but because I apply it so differently. And
Mm.
I would never have understood that before. I mean, I wish I knew that years ago. This would have been a shortcut to where I am now.
I saw a quote just this morning, and I'm pulling it up. Perfection is not when there's no more to add, but no more to take away. And I think that goes hand in hand with your wisdom definition.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and perhaps your reasons or purposes have changed over the years or evolved. But what drives you to be such a great psychologist? Are there any individuals that stand out as most influential to your growth, success, or desire to keep helping others at the scale that you have?
There have been four major forces in my life. And certainly the first one I would pay homage to is my father. And I would not have said that when I was younger. We did not have a great relationship because I didn't understand it. He didn't know how to parent. His father abandoned him when he was about 3 or 4 years old. But he's been a profound influence, and I wish Dad was around that I could have that and pay a tribute to him so he would know that. And then I would say that Dr. Anthony Polisi, who's now in his 90s and who was my, my first mentor, he was my therapist at a point in time. And then as we disengaged from that, he became my mentor in my practice. And Dr. Robert Smith, who was essential for my discoveries of humanistic psychology in a very, very profound way. He studied after he graduated his degree from University of Maryland. He went to Sri Lanka and studied with a guru for about 6 months or 9 months. We didn't see Robert, but he came back, and that was profound. And certainly Dr. Christina Vasari, who changed my life. She didn't change my career; she changed my life. She helped me understand that what I was doing and the application of it in the sports arena, but it was certainly much broader than that. But I would say those were four pivotal individuals that helped me pivot my way through life and then allow myself to focus on my own self-discovery. But very significant factors that they each provided me with: data, experience, and lovingness, each of them.
I absolutely love that. And going on that thread of what we talked about earlier of choices, right? I made a choice to leave financial services and go into this profession, and then I met Dr. Rob Gilbert, who introduced me to you, Dr. Nick Molinaro, who, when I went out to play lacrosse in San Diego, introduced me to Dr. Christina Brasari. So I feel the same way about you three, definitely, and the influences that I've had, the experiences I've had, and I'm just like you. The best is yet to come. I'm excited for that. At this point in time in which we're speaking, September of 2020, there's still a stigma around mental health and not a wide scale value on mental performance training. What do you think needs to be done for that stigma to subside, and how does mental performance become a topic that's talked about more and valued higher?
It's a great question, Mark. Since the pandemic has occurred, you and I participated in some work with SDUIS and Dr. Vasari to offer information to individuals during this period of time, obviously free of service. And all this period of time, I've been doing some, community service as well. And so we've looked at, the term mental. There's so many connotations around that. And so I've in a corporation that is trying to figure out another way to offer mental health, we talk about wellness. So we'll call it mental wellness, versus mental health. And the problem is anything that has mental with it, it has a connotation that it's one flew over the cuckoo's nest, and you're going to wind up in, some facility. So I've been looking at this in terms of mental wellness as a way to look at optimal performance. The mental skills training tries to move away from that, but I still think that the application of the term mental to anything has a kind of stigma. So I think until it becomes associated with well-being, and so when we look at well-being and we look at it mostly from physical, and people will talk about it sometimes spiritual, and every once in a while they'll talk about it in terms of mental. So I would like to look at this in terms of wellness. Now, why aren't we focusing on wellness? Well, the problem is that when you talk to psychologists, we only get paid from insurance companies when we can prove that there is a condition that has to be treated. So conditions get treated, and that's why therapy is paid for. And if you go to a doctor, they're going to treat you for a condition. They're not going to treat you for a problem. Problems get solved, conditions get treated. So there's a double-edged sword here about how we can move past this by looking at problems that people are having and not to be considered as conditions, because then it fits into therapy. So the stigma, I think, is going to be long-lasting until all of us understand that there are conditions that we have to change, like the condition of thinking in a way that hurts us from high-level performance. And I'm not even talking about sport or business. I'm talking about just being in the world. So there's our our being, right? There's Mark's being Mark, and then there's Mark's being, coach, a performance coach, an athlete. And so when we put ourselves in context, our being doesn't change. Our performance of our being changes. So I think if we can really get into a mindset of the essence of us, which comes down to the elements of our existence, and that is our spirituality. It is from where everything emanates. It is the spirit that drives us. But I don't think that the world is ready to really understand that. I try to do this in a small corner of my world to get people to become more aware of that essence.
Dr. Nick, that was a remarkable answer, and thank you so much. You were talking about the levels of mind mechanics, stress management, uh, and then spiritual purpose, meaning, and existential earlier. And I think the same goes for stress. I think if you, this is my opinion, but I think if you gave a survey about the word stress, it would get a really bad connotation. Meanwhile, the right stress and the right amount of stress is actually substantial for growth. I will get us off of a very heavy topic because I want to ask you a more lighthearted question. There are many elite athletes who excel in the art of staying in the moment and performing great under pressure. Athletes like Rafael Nadal in tennis, Tom Brady in football, Mariano Rivera in baseball, Tiger Woods in golf come to mind. From a mental performance perspective, what athletes today do you admire and why?
There's in my mind, there's the answer to that to me is always Tiger Woods. And it's not about golf. It is about what he's done with his mind. Outside of, taking a 6-iron to his head because of something he had done that his wife was not happy with, making decisions like that. But when you look at what he's been able to do, and people will call this phenomenon Tiger focus. Now, anyone who's observed Tiger watches his head come back to the ball and his eyes and his blinking. And you know that by the time he finishes that blink, that the next thing he's going to do is close to his perfection in his sport consistently. Now, I've not seen that in another athlete. Because of my interest in race car driving, it's not really the speed. It's the precision. And there's no faster heart rate in any athlete than a Formula One driver. For the hour and a half or hour and 15 minutes that they're driving at 225 miles an hour, the precision, and if you've ever been in a race car, you would know that if you are off the apex by an inch, you will lose speed at the end of that lap. And when I first was taught this is one of the reasons why I drove race cars, is because I'm intrigued by the physics of the same thing with golf. And I think when you look at a race car driver whose attention is to the mechanics of making that turn at just the right moment, making sure that somebody who's traveling at 224 miles an hour isn't going to try to get on the inside of you. You have to make that turn with such precision. Race car drivers aren't grasping the wheel like, it's a death grip. It's driven with such perfection in their hands. So high-performing race car drivers, Hamilton is clearly an indication of an individual who can maintain control over their heart rate, over their attention, and being able to move that steering wheel with such grace and precision. Those are the two people that come to my mind.
Excellent. Oh my gosh. And I think that maintenance of control, if there's anything I could say about it, is because I was just watching the Mike Tyson documentary just the other day. And one thing that really stood out about the documentary is how he continually said, when I was walking to the ring, I was deathly afraid, but supremely confident. And I just want to drive home the point that whether Tiger Woods has that focus, or for the Formula One driver, it's not supreme confidence without any feelings of doubt or fear. There is that still, but their intention is driving their attention in that moment, which is just everything. And what's amazing about it is the absolute locked in focus, and there's not this smidgen of a loss of intention, which I love. If you were to give a piece of advice to step away from the professional athlete, if you will, I recently viewed a TED Talk called "How quote a normal people can train like the world's best endurance athlete," which I recommend. But when you want to give advice to someone that's looking to build their mental edge, where would you suggest that they start?
It actually starts with this whole philosophy, that every moment of every day, you have the opportunity to make the best decision that you can make. Every moment of every day. Now, most of our decision making, even as I'm speaking now, is subconscious, right? I mean, I can't think of every word I'm going to say before I say it. So there's something about my intention to answer Mark's question. There's my intention is to make it meaningful and purposeful. I have to think about that. Although I'm speaking, I think because of what I would describe as the essence or the spirituality or the purpose or the meaning of all of what I'm doing is driven by this, which is subconscious. But the only way that that can take place is that there is an intention to do so. Now, most of my speaking, as is most of yours, is subconscious, but it's driven by that. There is an essence that's within me to have meaning and purpose and to move away from things like doubt in order for me to articulate this. So I would say to everybody that you really got to get in touch with that spirit, that intention that drives you. And it can't just be cavalier. It can't just be opportunistic. It can't be just experienced. Certainly as we are maturing by the time we get to our wisdom in our later life, but there's that essence that drives us. And that's what I would suggest you pay attention to.
I was going to ask you along those lines of anxiety that we were talking about earlier. I was going to ask you about doubt and apathy, because everybody goes through those stages. Even Michael Jordan, in the 7 years that he won 6 championships, he lost his father and he was apathetic. Doesn't want to play basketball. So even the peak performer goes through that apathy. Would you answer the apathy question with the same answer? Does it revolve around the essence?
Yes, I think that I understand that we're human, and that's why we get affected by things like apathy or doubt. But when you transcend that, and that's why I think even when you look at what that's about, um, is to go past what we're feeling or thinking and transcend that, and to recognize, to me, that once I gave up that basic belief that those factors should be significant enough to stop me from performing at a high level. Once I gave that up, things started to change. So I do think that this is the act of the will. It just cannot be reactive. That when I go back to the point about every moment of every day, that we have the opportunity to choose to be determined, choose to excel. That's what grit's about. It's not about, accolades. It's not about reinforcement. It's about the use of the mind and the spirit and the will to make a decision that nothing should stop us, not because of what we're going to get, but just because that's the truth. We have the power to let nothing stop us.
I love that. Your work is so exceptional, and you brought up Man's Search for Meaning. Are there any other books, podcasts, or sources of inspiration and information that come to mind that have profound impact on you that you think listeners should go to?
Sport and Spirituality is probably my favorite book. There's several authors on that, and there's four of them. Nesty is one of them, Mark Nesty. So I absolutely think that that's essential. The Prophet by Khalil Gibran. I think the life's lessons in there are essential. There's paragraphs about his work on teaching, on friendship, on dying, on reason, on passion. That's a great, great work. And certainly, probably the most important book in my life is the Bible. And Ecclesiastes is an amazing book to read.
Thank you so much. One more question here is, as I said in the introduction, this podcast has guests who, in my opinion, live their lives with pursuit of greatness in mind. You have and continue to do great things. Turning it over to you, though, and in your opinion, when you think of people who have achieved greatness, what does that look like, and how would you define greatness?
Um, Certainly, I wouldn't describe myself as great or I've done great things. So I appreciate your comment about that. But what I would say is that anyone, people which might even describe as the common man, does a great thing when they're attentive to being aware of others and being selfless and driving their attention to offering kindness. And it's not cordiality. It's based on being authentic. Where you genuinely appreciating others. So altruism, there's a lot of study about altruism, about are you really getting something from that? I think a person who's really great is aware of others and offers their kindness to them.
I love that. One of the quotes I came across that everybody should wake up with is, "Who needs me? Who needs me?" Right? Because if you wake up with that in mind, that's spiritual. That is way beyond self, and that goes right hand in hand with
Right.
awareness of others. If someone, and I'm sure that this will happen, a listener was moved by what you said today, where can they follow you, and where can they reach out to you?
Thank you, Mark. I have a number of websites. I would say go to Performance in Mind, although it's reflecting a lot of what I'm doing currently in performance, and that's in business. Certainly, you can see me there. Instagram, Dr. Nick 4328, Dr. Nick Golf. You can see some of those things, and clearly, if you're interested, you can purchase my book, Beyond the Scoreboard, Learn It in Youth Sports, Carry It Through Life, with my co-author, Celeste Romano, and that's available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. And some of the things we spoke about are in that. It's kind of a concise learning about how to do the basics, not the stuff at the deeper level, which probably you and I will write about in the near future.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nate, for coming on. It's been an exceptional experience having you as a mentor, and I'm looking forward to our friendship in the future.
Well, thank you, Mark. It's a pleasure to be in your life and to have you in mine.